You're listening to the Options Insider Radio Network, the home of the Options Podcast. For more quality options programs, visit theoptionsinsider.com or search for Options Insider Radio Network in your podcast provider of choice. Listeners can also access all of our programming through our mobile app available in the iTunes and Google Play stores. Select programs are also available via live stream at mixlr.com/options-insider. That's mixlr.com/options-insider. Don't forget to follow along with your favorite programs and submit your own questions for the hosts at twitter.com/options, stocktwits.com/options, facebook.com/theoptionsinsider, or via questions at theoptionsinsider.com. Bitcoin, Ether, Solana, Doge, and more. Cryptocurrencies and digital assets are taking the financial world by storm. This exploding market provides everything a savvy trader needs: volatility, volume, and liquidity, provided you know how to find it. That's where we come in. Welcome to the Crypto Rundown. Each week, we'll break down the latest trading activity, trends, and developments throughout the world's leading crypto derivatives markets. If it's moving the crypto markets, then you'll find it on the Crypto Rundown. The Crypto Rundown is brought to you by Amberdata. If you're entering the digital asset class, you'll need access to granular on-chain and market data from multiple venues to power research, trading, risk management, and compliance. Amberdata delivers comprehensive data and insights into blockchain networks, crypto markets, and decentralized finance, empowering financial institutions to apply traditional finance methods to digital assets. Amberdata eliminates the infrastructure setup, integration challenges, and maintenance headaches to access digital asset data, reducing cost and time to market to enter the digital asset class. Learn more and download their digital asset data guide at www.amberdata.io. Now it's time to dive into the exploding world of crypto derivatives. It's time for the Crypto Rundown.
All right, everybody. That music means we are back here on the network. Time for a little bit of the old Crypto Rundown, the program here on the network where we move beyond our traditional stomping grounds. Not going to talk about equity volatility or equity options or, your apples or your spies and all that kind of fun stuff. Nope. Going to go a little bit further afield, see what's cooking in the land of Bitcoin and ETH from a volume, volatility, skew, OI, all sorts of fun perspectives out there, and maybe delve into some other fun aspects of the crypto space as well. My name, of course, Mark Longo from the THE, optionsinsider.com, as well as from the network upon which so many of you are binging these days. Remember, if you like what you hear, this show, anything else on the network, do throw a like, a star, a comment, whatever your platform lets you do. All of it in aggregate does help new people continue to discover not just the Crypto Rundown, but indeed the full network. And of course, if you just listen to the Crypto Rundown, man, you are missing out on a whole bunch of other fun stuff. So make sure you're listening to the full network, wherever you get this. And then, of course, if you want even more content in your lives, you want to turn your trading up to 11 with some awesome pro content. Only one place to go, theoptionsinsider.com/pro. Dare I say it, quite a few of our recent pro Q&A sessions have had significant portions devoted to the world of crypto derivatives and volatility and how they trade and all sorts of fun. So if you're into the intersection of crypto and derivatives and you listen into this show, so I have to assume you probably are, then you should be checking out the pro, theoptionsinsider.com/pro. Also getting options oddities, also getting live access to this and everything else we do over here on the old network. And that's not enough for you folks. And if access to an exclusive pro podcast feed, we have closing in on 300 episodes waiting for you. The second you hit that button, you also get your name in the hat for the Pro Trading Crate coming up on the December one. In fact, crazy to say, because Christmas is next Monday, and then, of course, after that, the following Monday is New Year's Day. This is actually the last Crypto Rundown for the year here as well, which is crazy. This year just flying by. In some ways, in my mind, it's still late March to me. In other ways, it's like, wow, how could this year have taken so long? So a crazy year, as they all have been the last few years at least. So we thought, who better to help us wind down the year here than our old buddy, Mr. Greg Magadini, the director of derivatives over there at Amberdata. Mr. Greg, welcome back to the Crypto Rundown. How goes your 2023? Can you believe it is winding to a close, sir?
Well, thank you so much, Mark. I'm definitely honored. It is flying by, I have to say. I can't believe we're almost through 2023.
Yeah, hard to believe indeed. So let's get the ball rolling and head right on into the Bitcoin breakdown.
It's time to explore the latest trending activity, trends, and developments across the world's leading crypto market. It's time for the Bitcoin Breakdown.
All right, everybody, welcome to the Bitcoin Breakdown, the portion of the show where we do just that. We break down the week that was and indeed still is out there in the world's leading digital asset. And Bitcoin looking a wee bit bigger than it was this time last week. We were a little bit north of 40K on the show this time last week. Listen, about 45.81. Coming into the start of the show today, over 1,000 points higher, 41,650 when we commenced operations on the show. Puts us up a little over 1,000, about 1,069 handles from where we were this time last week. Of course, we saw a little bit of drag on the crypto space last week. SEC coming out saying they're going to punt on some of their decisions into next year, particularly on the ETH side. So a lot of that just maybe stemming some of that crypto optimism. And we've seen mostly the engines revving ever since then. Bulls trying to get out there a little bit, but not a ton of bit in their teeth. We'll see. Maybe that will change. We all know in the crypto space, the worm can turn on a dime. So a lot to unpack. Let's get out there. Mr. Greg, what's been catching your eye out there in the world of Bitcoin since we last chatted?
All right. So I think really the big story in Bitcoin is the January 12th options listing. Deribit released this contract a little bit early. We have some DeFi protocols also releasing this contract. This is trading for the spot Bitcoin ETF announcement. And you can see if you look at the term structure, we have a pretty large kink in terms of implied vol. So just to kind of give you an idea, if we're looking at just the implied volatility term structure and we look at the sort of the high point going into January of next year, we see 52 implied vol, but the forward vol for that contract is really 65%. And if I look at 7-day realized since October, the highest that we've seen it is at 67%. So really what we're looking at is the market is pricing the spot Bitcoin ETF announcement to have the type of volatility that we would see, that we've seen when Bitcoin broke 30K, had a massive rally all the way up to 44. Kind of that type of volatility is being priced in. So that's something that's very interesting, and it's kind of what the market is looking at right now.
Let's see what the market is looking at from an overall vol perspective. Remember, if you listeners, you want to play along with the show, only one place to go, amberdata.io. The place to go to kick the tires and light the fires out there. If you did that, you would see that the weekly vol has come in a little bit since our last show. Last show was hanging out a little bit north of 52 and a half to be precise. It has come in quite a bit, about down to about a 44 right now. Again, a couple of caveats there. First off, when you're talking weekly, I still view weekly vol as mostly gamma. I know it's hard to really avoid the weekly conversation these days because so much interest, so much activity is going up in the 0-day range and in the short duration range, but still something to bear in mind. Also, we are heading into a seasonally quiet period for the markets and certainly for volatility. So a lot of those could be coming to bear in that weekly vol number. If we go out to the 30-day vol, which is a little bit more in the traditional range where people tend to look at volatility, that's looking a little bit different. It was about a 50 and a half on the show last week. Coming into the start of the show today, about a 52. So getting a little bit frothier out there, which kind of lines up more with what Greg was saying and some of those numbers we were talking about earlier in the show. If we go out a little bit farther, we go out 6 months. That's usually where the calmer, the cooler, the saner, more level heads in the world of crypto tend to hang out, a little bit longer term. And we're hanging out there. It's not that dissimilar from what it was this time last week, down slightly. It's about a 56.70 on the show last week and a little bit north of 56, about 56.15 right now. Mr. Greg, what are your thoughts on the vol numbers we're seeing out there in Bitcoin land this week?
Yeah, well, I think I really think that the market is, lining up for some more upside volatility. Last week we saw some nice downside volatility, but I really think the market is getting itself prepared for that. But what's really interesting is that if we look at sort of the wings for January and end of year options, really looking at January 26th, because it's a good proxy because we've had that contract around for a while. What we've seen is that although implied vol is still pretty high compared to realized, the call wing has come down a lot. So this creates sort of an interesting situation where, let's just say you wanted to go along the Bitcoin call wing, call it the 25 delta call, and you want to hedge it by selling the perp. So right now the perps are trading at a premium on CME. Last I checked, around 14% annualized basis. And so what you can do is you can go along that call wing, which has come down a lot, and then short the perp against it. So they have this sort of delta neutral strategy. But as vol pumps up into the spot Bitcoin ETF announcement, you're going to pick up deltas along the way. And so this kind of creates this nice situation that if you expect some sort of implied vol ramp up into the spot Bitcoin ETF announcement and you have some sort of slight delta bias, that's kind of a nice way to position that structure. And while we wait, we don't have to sort of worry about the direction as Bitcoin's kind of testing this $40,000 level. And now we're back up to 41.5, kind of just hanging around here. Having a little bit of a delta neutral position makes a lot of sense. And then that will kind of even itself out as the implied vol pumps up into spot Bitcoin ETF announcement. So I think that's something that's very interesting. In terms of flows, we've actually saw really big chunky straddle selling a few days ago. We saw 1,000 Bitcoin straddles being sold for the March 29th expiration. So that's $10 million of premium. And then that was offset by 1,900, or excuse me, 19,000, $2,400 ETH straddles for the same expiration for $10 million premium. So we're seeing a big relative vol trade going on, expecting ETH implied vol to continue to outperform Bitcoin as it has recently. So those are two of the kind of the main things that I'm seeing right now in terms of the space.
Interesting. We got some interesting stuff afoot in the land of ETH vol. I want to get there in a second. Before we get there, listeners, let's finish up on the Bitcoin front. Let's get out to the skew first. And the skew, last week it was looking very, very seriously negative, down about a -3. That's, again, not as negative as we've seen. We've seen it much worse than that, but also compared to just the nonstop optimism we've seen out there of late, a -3 seems pretty stark by comparison. That is mostly gone. You're down about a -0.5, which is roughly flat again. So again, kind of leaning back to the market right now, kind of vacillating, not sure which direction they're going. No strong bias, at least in the near-dated stuff, in one direction or the other. You get out to the monthly stuff, and it's pretty much the same story. Last week it was about a -0.5, which is where the weekly skew is hanging out right now. This week it's about a positive 0.6, so it's swung about a point to the upside, but anything around a half is still pretty much flat, listeners. So again, no huge bias on the skew on the monthly front as well, which again could also be indicative of what we were just talking about earlier. It is kind of getting into that portion of the year, the seasonally quiet portion of the year, and just not a lot cooking out there right now. Getting out a little bit farther, going out 6 months on the skew, and it's the same story out there. We had about a positive 3.4. So longer term, you're usually going to see a net positive bias out there, and that's still what we see, and even it is coming in a little bit. A 3.4 on the show last week, 3.15 this week. Going out to Deribit, seeing what's open out there, listeners. Again, kind of a seasonally quiet time. Not a heck of a lot. Lighten up the books out there. The OI kind of down, but down slightly across the board. About 230,000 contracts on the call side open on Deribit. That's down about 2,000. So not much, pretty much a rounding error. And the puts, same deal, 119,000 open. That's down about 2,000 from this time last week. So not a lot cooking out there in terms of OI. Greg, anything catching your eye out there on the skew front in the world of Bitcoin before we roll on out to some other products?
Yeah, absolutely. So kind of just to echo your point and what I was saying earlier, that the call wing has come down a lot. So the risk reversal skew has cheapened a lot. What we saw in November and mid-November, call it 30-day skew to 90-day skew, is trading between +5 to +8 points. And I think really right now, this is a good time to sort of play that skew again, going into that spot Bitcoin ETF announcement. I wouldn't be surprised if we saw some sort of like enthusiasm come back for that call wing as that decision date approaches.
A lot of decisions in the offing here, listeners. So stay tuned to the Crypto Rundown through January. Should be a very interesting month in the world of crypto. You know, people get wild with their predictions out there. Some people saying if these things are approved, then we're looking at, blowing the doors off the previous highs around north of 60K, talking over 100K for Bitcoin. All the optimistic stuff we used to hear starting to come back a little bit again. So that's kind of interesting at the very least. Maybe you're fading it out there as well. Maybe you think these optimistic predictions, maybe these approvals won't come to pass. Either way, should be a very interesting month, January, and maybe even into February and beyond a little bit. The Q1, let's just call it Q1, should be very interesting from a crypto perspective. You know what else is interesting, listeners? Are some of the other products you folks like to sling a little bit of crypto in your securities account, particularly on the options side right now. Let's get out to BITO right now at about a 2060 when we kicked off the show, up about 0.6 of a point. So BITO kind of treading water back to where it was a couple of weeks ago out there as well. The ADV 51,000's up about 1,000 on the week. Kind of light today, closing in on 20,000 on the BITO front. So again, not a ton lighting it up out there today, but we shall see. The worm can always turn out there. Actually, it's already up about 24,000 now. So it has kicked in a little bit just in the last half an hour or so. So it seems like it is going to threaten that ADV, if not quite exceeded out there today. The vol at about a 62 out there in BITO right now, up about 2 points on the week. So looking pretty frothy out there as well. But again, we've seen BITO get higher. In terms of top positions, no real change out there week on week. The number one size position in BITO, still almost 100,000 of the Jan 2025 30s. That kind of gels a little bit with that 1x2 Greg was telling us he has on earlier as well. He likes a little bit of the call 1x2s. And it looks like people just like straight up upside here in BITO to the tune of nearly 100,000 of the Jan 2025 30s, followed by number two, 83,000 of the regular Jan 65. So those have a ways to go. Probably not going to hit it. Imagine if we hit, maybe that's just a straight up spec on these approvals I was talking about, listeners. Imagine if we hit a 65 in BITO by Jan expiration. What is going on in the crypto markets? My goodness. Wow, that would be quite the month. Again, stay tuned. A lot could be popping off next month in the world of crypto. I don't know, Greg, do you see a 65 by Jan expiration? How good would your 1x2s be looking then?
They would not be looking too good, I have to say.
No, probably not.
That's not how I'm leaning it. That would be quite the move, for sure. It would be exciting. I would definitely cover my position in that case.
Not the best for your position. Awesome for the show, though, I will say. That would be quite the content bonanza. I could see listener numbers exploding even more than they already have if we start threatening a 65 out there. Speaking of what you folks are up to, you guys also like to sling a little bit of Mara, and AKA Marathon digital holdings out there, listeners. This is the one, whenever we do polls or just looking at the overall volume numbers, we talk about which names you folks like to sling in crypto options. Marathon is always the name you folks come at us with. Man, it's been on quite the roller coaster. Shot up to almost 17 back about 10 days ago on the 8th of Friday. So it ended that week almost looking like it was going to hit a 17. Then it sold off on our show last week. It was down to about 14 and change again. So sold off over about $2.50 almost. Seemed like the worm had turned on Marathon. Of course, I mentioned those approvals maybe not coming to pass as soon as people had hoped, so people were maybe souring a bit on Marathon. And then over the last week, Marathon just been on the rampage again, got the bit in its teeth, up over about $5.15, or fully almost 35%, trading threatening a 20 handle right now, listeners. So just bonkers paper out here in Marathon right now. This is probably why this name leads the volume from an ADV perspective out there in terms of the crypto-related names. 281,000. That is the ADV right now, Liz. That's up about 10,000 from this time last week. And of course, if we look at today's numbers, I got a feeling that's going to be growing even more. We're already at 357,000 contracts on the tape in Mara right now. So if you're thinking there's not a lot of activity for you in the world of crypto and indeed crypto-related derivatives, then man, you're missing out on a whole bunch of paper. Right now in Mara, the big dog are about 21,500 of the D20s going out this week. So again, the conversation is all about what have you done for me right now. That's in the weeklies, and that's where everybody's playing. Next, we have 15,000 of the D19s going up today. And not to be forgotten, there are some puts leading the dance out there as well. Almost 15,000 of the D17 puts. Seems like paper is mostly selling those, so maybe using some of those to finance the 19 calls or the 20 calls. Either way, looks like we have a lot of upside bias paper, which again, not surprising. The name's up a third over the past 5 days. I would be surprised if it was anything else. All this, again, expiring this week. So this is all very front-dated paper here. So a lot of paper going up out here in Mara. In terms of the top positions out there right now, the big dog, unless today's paper changes it, 'cause some of these positions are not that big, the big dog is 35,000 of the Jan 10s. So those 10s were looking good already last week, even though they had given up quite a bit. Looking a hell of a lot better this week. My goodness, nearly 10 handles in the money at this point. If passes per log paper, probably buying those, but you never know. Also, behind it, 28,000 of the Jan 10 puts, so it could be some buyers on those as well, in which case those not looking so bueno. Everybody loves the 10s in Mara. And then the number 3 position, we have 26,000 of the Jan 2025, so longer term 10 calls. So apparently, Greg, it's all about the 10 strike in Mara. Have you been paying attention to this massive pop? I know Mara isn't your favorite. You prefer, like you said, your little upside vertical in Bitto, but kind of hard to ignore this big move out here this week.
Yeah, this is interesting. It's actually not a stock that I follow at all. Coinbase is one that I follow, but Mara isn't. So I'm just grabbing the chart here, and it's definitely skyrocketing pretty hard. Pretty interesting because this seems to be a stock that has the ability to drop when sort of Bitcoin interest and crypto interest goes away. The value of Mara quickly goes away, but it's an interesting stock. I'm not too sure what to make of it.
Let's see if we know what to make of the altcoin universe, listeners, because here we go.
It's time to move beyond Bitcoin and find out what's moving the rest of the crypto marketplace. It's time to boldly venture into the altcoin universe.
All right, everybody, welcome to the altcoin universe, the portion of the show where we explore everything outside of the big dog, except for right now when we're talking about the top 10 from a market cap perspective. Greg will be very sad. He may want to hang up on the show now because his favorite, his biggest holding in the world of crypto, Tron, once again, kicked to the curb this week, listeners, not in the top 10. Instead, it is his other favorite, Dogecoin, holding on to its spot in the top 10, if ever so slightly. Number 10 is Doge, 12.8 billion worth of market cap. Again, it used to be number 8, pretty firmly at number 8. Then it slowly got kicked down to number 9. Now it's holding on for dear life, trying to keep its way in the top 10. At least for this week, the answer is yes. Doge, number 10, 12.8 billion. Number 9, eclipsing it quite a bit now, Avalanche, 14.6, almost 14.7. So nearly 2 billion more market cap in Avalanche right now than in Doge. Number 8, Cardano, 20.3 billion. Number 7, USD Coin, 24.5 billion. Number 6, it's Solana. Actually, Solana has been just this crazy story of just not even the year, just the last few months really out there in Solana. Just the resurgence of Solana and everything associated with it. Solana has its own meme coins now, and those are exploding. It's a crazy world out there in Solana. Number 5, though, XRP, the one a lot of you have been waiting with bated breath for it to make a move. Not this week, listeners. 32.6, still hanging out. Number 5, though. Number 4, BNB, 36.1 billion. Number 3, it's Tether, almost 91 billion. Number 2, it's ETH, 261 billion. And the big dog, Bitcoin, a little bit bigger this week, 816 billion worth of market cap. Not that far away from the 1T level. We were past it in the past. It's been a while since we were able to say a 1T. Will we get there again? Well, if we get these approvals. That could certainly be the case. Greg, Are you okay to continue with the show now that your favorite Tron has once again been kicked from the top 10, sir? Or do you need a moment to collect yourself?
I am definitely not crying about it. I am not a Tron fan whatsoever.
No Tron. He's just saying that for the show listeners. He can't get enough of the Tron for himself. In terms of the number 2 out there, listeners, which is ETH. I know number 1 in a lot of your hearts. Trading right around 2175, 2172 actually, when we kicked off the show, listeners. In terms of range on the week, we actually did get higher. We got up north of 2300. That came on Thursday. Right around 2317 was the high on Thursday. The low coming in pretty much as we're coming into the show today at about 2172, actually, when we kicked off the show. So intriguing stuff out there. So you got a little bit of a range. It's always interesting to see when you're looking at ETH from an overall vol and skew perspective. Let's get out there and see what's cooking. 7-day vol, where we always start these days, at about a 48.2 when we kicked off the show. That's down a little over 8 points. We're at a 56.3 this time last week on the show. 30-day vol, where more people tend to hang out looking at vol. I was at about a little bit north of a 55 on the show last week. This week, about a 54, almost 54 and a half. So down, but down slightly on the week. That's mostly treading water. You're going out about 6 months, listeners. We had about a 61 and a half on that 180-day vol come in to start the show today. Almost a 60, about a 60.2. So coming in a little bit there as well. Mr. Greg, if you can hold off consoling yourself on the fall from graces of Tron, sir. What's catching your eye out there? An overall ETH price perspective, as well as what's going on the vol side in ETH.
Yeah, on the vol side, what's kind of interesting is if I look at sort of the open interest, the put call open interest between Bitcoin and ETH, Bitcoin call options are about 2 times as big as put options, but ETH call options are about 3 times as big. And if we're looking at sort of the block flow over the past week, whereas Bitcoin, you actually saw like some puts being bought in terms of block trades. On ETH, it's really a lot of just call paper. So we're seeing some January 26, $25,000 calls that traded 10,000 times. Some December 22nd, this end of the week, we saw some $2,400 calls trade 8,000 times. So a lot of interesting demand on the call side for ETH. Now, something else that's kind of interesting is that in terms of buying or selling, so that's sort of the open interest and the flow. But where we're seeing on the gamma profiles how dealers are positioned, really the main negative gamma area is only between 2,100 to 23.5, so or 23.50. So that's kind of the negative gamma zone. And so we're seeing, very muted potential to actually trade through that $2,500 strike that people have blocked recently because dealers have some inventory on hand to essentially sell that to the street. So it's interesting. There's some optimism for ETH, but in terms of paper supply, I actually think that the potential for explosive up move in ETH is not as big as Bitcoin, judging by dealer inventories.
That lines up with what we were seeing out here as well. In fact, that's what I wanted to ask you about when we get to the skew, because I'm seeing something in the skew that I don't recall seeing out there, at least not for quite some time. And that is a heck of a lot of nothing. Let's get to it, listeners. You go out to the 7-day skew last week. We were pretty positive, almost a positive 3, about 2.7 points to the upside. Again, listeners, if you're confused by all the stuff we're throwing about skew and, delta, big, all these things, check out Options Bootcamp, Options Playbook Radio on the network. Those will get you up to speed on a lot of these terms we're throwing around out here. Coming into the start of this week, listeners, it is completely flat. No bias in any direction. You might say, okay, well, that's the weekly skew. No big deal. Let's go out a little bit farther. That's what we thought. So we did the same thing. We saw on the show last week, the monthly skew was hanging out pretty flat, about bias slightly positive, about a quarter. That's pretty much flat. Coming into the start of the show today, still flat. So now we're looking at the weekly skew showing a heck of a lot of nothing, and the monthly skew showing a heck of a lot of nothing. But we said, okay, let's go out a little bit farther. Usually longer term, that's where the hardcore hodlers live. That's where the bullish upside, kind of hard to kill. There's usually a bit of a upside bias out there, except when you're talking about maybe the depths of crypto winter. Outside of those periods, usually you got some long-term upside bias to look forward to. And that was the case this time last week. It was nearly a positive 6 going out 180 days. Today, Greg, absolutely flat once again. So looking across the board, just about every duration we could see here, it's showing a whole heck of a lot of nothing to the upside in the skew, which would back up exactly what you were saying, that right now no one's looking for an explosive upside in ETH. Is that what you're seeing, Greg?
Yeah, that's what I'm seeing in terms of dealer inventory. So it's quite interesting because there's a few big players who are sort of doing contrarian bets, like the relative vol trade I talked about on the Bitcoin section, where we saw a big relative vol trade where someone's selling Bitcoin vol and buying ETH vol. Up here, when ETH vol is actually trading higher than Bitcoin vol. So if I look at that March that they traded right now, ETH March vol is at 57, and then Bitcoin March vol is at 54 for these at the monies. So that's something that's interesting because 2023 has been the year of Bitcoin in terms of relative vol. So that's kind of a counter trade. And then again, that block paper where we're seeing $2,500 calls being bought, again, that's a little bit of a going against the grain. Most of the positioning in terms of dealer inventory is that they're already kind of jammed along a lot of paper. So they would love to unload some of this paper.
Yeah, I'm hard-pressed to think of the last time I saw zero bid or zero bias in any direction across all of the skew in ETH. It's kind of just like, we're just shrugging our shoulders headed into the end of the year. That certainly stood out to me as I'm looking at the numbers this week, listeners. So if you were betting on massive explosive upside heading into the end of the year in ETH, I don't know. Looking at these numbers, you might want to reconsider that. And not a lot of paper backing you up, at least not right now. On the good side, that means if you did want to buy upside, it's going to be cheap. There's no upside bid for vol, but it just doesn't seem like a lot of people are piling into that trade right now. Again, some of that could be seasonal. Not a lot going on right now. Also, that trade we just talked about with Greg kind of dampened down some of the vol there as well. So probably a little bit of column A, a little bit of column B, but still hard-pressed to think of another time in recent memory where I saw this much nothing on the ETH skew front, which is fascinating in and of itself. Let's get out to the OI front. A little bit different story than we saw in Bitcoin. Bitcoin was mostly kind of treading water. ETH up slightly, at least on the upside side. 2.36 million calls open on Deribit. Up about 80,000 from this time last week. The puts, again, kind of treading water. 890,000. Down about 3,000. Let's roll on through some other altcoin here. Then maybe we'll get some questions and get out of here. Actually, before we can do that, we can also think about maybe, Greg, it is going to be our final show of the year. Kind of snuck up on me, too. So if you have any final thoughts you want to share with our listeners here before we get out of this segment, I'll give you a chance to mull those over in terms of, from your recollection, what really stood out. Could be a Bitcoin, could be an ETH, could be any other altcoin from a skew, from a vol, the interesting trends or things that really stood out to you for 2023. I know I'm throwing you a curveball, so I'll buy you a few minutes here as we go on out to the rest of the altcoin universe listeners. First, let's go out to Solana. I was joking about them earlier, but you're doing well if you're long Solana right now. I don't care what flavor of Solana it is. Maybe the stupid meme coins. You're in those. Bonk, I think it is. Just blowing the doors off out there right now. Solana kicking the crap out of everything this week as well. 72.05 when we kicked off the show. That's up about almost 3 points, about 279 from where it was this time last week, about 69 and a quarter. So again, Solana took a bit of a hiatus, but now it's back with gusto. Speaking of a hiatus, that's the only word I can really use to describe XRP. 60 cents last week and change, 60 even fractional this week as well, down about half a cent. I feel for all you XRP holders out there, you've been waiting so patiently for so long. You've seen the rest of the crypto market just explode to the upside and then fall out of bed and then rally again. XRP has really done none of that. We had a brief moment earlier this year. They thought some of the rulings were coming down and they thought maybe, finally, this thing is going to have a resolution one way or the other. And then we're right back to about 60 cents again. It's this thing just cannot get out of its own way. I feel for all you XRP holders. It doesn't seem like that long ago. You have the early days and all these names are spinning up and everyone was diving into Coinbase and others, and the Kraken was the hot one. You got to get into Kraken because they're your vector for Ripple. And lo and behold, a whole heck of a lot of nothing since then. Dogecoin, Greg's other favorite, kind of treading water this week as well. It's 9.2 cents on the show last week and about 9 cents even this week, so down slightly. Litecoin taking a little bit of a breather this week, 71.81 on the show last week, 70.15 this week, so down about 1 2/3 on the week. Let's run through a few others here. Cardano getting a little bit of a lift, 53.1 cents last week, 57.8 cents, so up nearly a nickel on the week. Polkadot, 644 last week, 671 this week, up a little over a quarter out there. And everyone's favorite, including Greg's new favorite, Shiba Inu, was a whopping 0.000092 last week. This week, a whopping 0.00001. Ticking up a little bit, moving to some decimal points. Look at that. Are the Shiba Lambos on the horizon? I know a lot of our listeners would like that. Not quite there yet, listeners, but you're a little bit closer. Maybe you're there. You're putting the bumper on that Lambo. Let's just say that out there in Shiba land. All right, Greg, bought you some time out there. I know when you're not talking to us here on the show, you're crunching the numbers on crypto vol all the time. So I have to imagine you have a lot of thoughts on this. But when you look back at this mad year that was 2023, from a Bitcoin, from an ETH, from a vol, from a skew, from just about any perspective you can think of out there right now, what are the major trends and takeaways that stand out to you, sir?
Yeah, I think the biggest takeaway from 2023 compared to 2022, and it's very interesting because it really flipped on a dime, is the spot vol correlation of Bitcoin from year to year. So 2022 was a negative spot vol regime. That's kind of the behavior of a risk asset. When markets crash, volatility comes up. So we saw that especially pronounced with the Terra Luna crash, the Three Arrows Capital crash, the FTX crash. And then after FTX went bankrupt and stopped withdrawals, Bitcoin kind of bottomed out around 15K. And then the second January 2023 rolled around, the option market was pricing positive spot vol regime, and we actually saw that follow through. So we saw the SVB banking crisis initially have a bearish note on Bitcoin, but then Bitcoin rallied and actually outperformed the rest of the crypto space and rallied with volatility. So we have an example of some positive spot vol. And then we saw that again during sort of the terrorist attacks in October, where Bitcoin rallied on the back of that. And so it's very interesting to me that Bitcoin went from a risk asset to a safe haven asset so far in 2023. So how we trade Bitcoin going forward will be really interesting. Right now, the positive spot vol regime seems to remain dominant. And then another interesting catalyst is that we saw ETH and Bitcoin actually diverge in terms of spot vol regimes. So ETH remains sort of the tech play in crypto, a little bit more of the risk asset, where Bitcoin is the digital gold, a little bit more of the safe haven asset. So that's kind of one of the main trends that I've seen. And then what's interesting today to me in terms of relative vol, and this is really good for U.S. Investors, in my opinion, is the differential between Coinbase and BITO or Bitcoin in terms of the forward vol for the spot Bitcoin ETF. So the forward vol for the January 12th expiration in Bitcoin is about 67 forward vol implied on the term structure, whereas Coinbase itself is only trading around 84. So there's almost no differential between the previous expiration and the expiration that includes the decision for Coinbase stock, but there's a vast differential for Bitcoin itself. And what's interesting to me is that Coinbase should be a big benefactor of a positive announcement for the spot Bitcoin ETF. And obviously, if it gets denied, then that should hurt Coinbase as well, because Coinbase is going to be the main custodian for all the ETFs. So Coinbase has a lot smaller market cap, about 35 billion, whereas Bitcoin has about 850 billion. And for the forward vol to be 67 versus Coinbase to be 84, I mean, that's pretty close considering the big difference in the size of the market cap. So to me, it seems like another interesting opportunity in the market right now.
All right, listeners, that music means we have come to the end of our journey, not just for today's episode of the Crypto Rundown, but also for the year on the Crypto Rundown. Crazy, wild to see out there. We do have a question coming in from ILM, so apparently the famous effects house asking questions of the show. But they just wanted to know, do you have any updates on the new Cboe crypto products? The answer is no. We even went and checked right before showtime just to see if anything new had broken on these or they had announced anything, and the answer is no. They are still poised to hit our hot little hands on January 11th. So again, like I said, January is going to hold a lot in store for the crypto space. So even if you're only tangentially interested in the world of crypto, you should be tuning into this show and paying attention to crypto. Certainly in the month of January, a lot popping off, including these new margin futures on Bitcoin and ETH. But if you even go look around Cboe Digital for yourselves there, ILM, you'll see the most recent info they have is from November of this year. So they haven't really updated anything yet. So we'll wait to see when these actually hit the market, what they're doing in terms of volume and the size of the contract and everything else. But right now, I wish we had more to say, but right now we're kind of waiting and seeing, like just about everything else in the world of crypto right now. Mr. Greg, thank you for joining us here on the final episode of the Crypto Rundown for this year. And before we go, if folks are intrigued, they want to kick the tires and light the fires on all this stuff we're talking about here on the show, the skew, the relative vol, the OI, the unusual activity, all that fun stuff and more, where should they go? What should they do, sir?
Yeah, if you want to check out our application with all our charts and everything like that, we have a free tier for everyone to check out. That's pro.amberdata.io. And if you want to read our weekly newsletter, that's amberDataDerivatives.substack.com. And then you can follow us at GenesisVol on Twitter.
There you go. Hit him up. You should be checking him out outside of his appearances here on this show. Some great stuff going up on the old YouTube. Their newsletter they put out on Twitter and other platforms, also a great read. I highly encourage, if you are intrigued by all these things we're talking about in the show, you want to get a little bit more into the weeds, then give Greg and the crew a follow over there. Or check out the platform, amberdata.io, to kick the tires and light the fires. That's going to do it for us on the network today. Going to do it for me for a few days here on the network as well. Back again on Thursday. Of course, you folks on the pro side already heard your double headers of pro Q&As last week, as well as, of course, 2 weeks of double headers on options boot camps. You folks on the pro side already got those in your hot little hands. For the rest of you, we'll be having options boot camp hitting the on-demand feed on Wednesday. I'll be traveling a little bit between now and then, but back again on Thursday for what's looking like it might be the final option block of the year as well, because of course Monday is of course Christmas, and the Thursday after that I may have some other things going on that may take me away from the microphone there. So it looks like it might be our final OB for the year as well. So all sorts of fun rundowns we could do there, looking back at a wild, mad, crazy year that was and indeed is 2018 out there. Then, of course, we'll be back again after that for TWIFO, which is the show all of you listening to this show should be listening to. TWIFO, This Week in Futures Options. And then back again in the new year for another episode of the Crypto Rundown. Have a great New Year's. Stay safe out there, and we'll see you back here next year. Another episode of the Crypto Rundown.
The Crypto Rundown is brought to you by Amberdata. If you're entering the digital asset class, you'll need access to granular on-chain and market data from multiple venues to power research, trading, risk management, and compliance. Amberdata delivers comprehensive data and insights into blockchain networks, crypto markets, and decentralized finance, empowering financial institutions to apply traditional finance methods to digital assets. Amberdata eliminates the infrastructure setup, integration challenges, and maintenance headaches to access digital asset data, reducing cost and time to market to enter the digital asset class. Learn more and download their digital asset data guide at www.amberdata.io. You're listening to the Options Insider Radio Network, the home of the Options Podcast. For more quality options programs, visit theoptionsinsider.com or search for Options Insider Radio Network in your podcast provider of choice. Listeners can also access all of our programming through our mobile app available in the iTunes and Google Play stores. select programs are also available via live stream at mixlr.com/options-insider. That's mixlr.com/options-insider. Don't forget to follow along with your favorite programs and submit your own questions for the hosts at twitter.com/options, stocktwits.com/options, facebook.com/theoptionsinsider, or via questions@theoptionsinsider.com.